Hey everyone, welcome back to From Zero. I'm Anusha, and this is where we talk about how we build from nothing. And today's episode is a little different. I have been thinking about what I have actually learned over the past 5 years. If you didn't know, I have been living in the US for about 3 years now. I moved from India. I'm moving back to India now. And I think there are like some things that I don't really like post about. And these are not like lessons that sound good on LinkedIn, but the actual ones that have changed how I operate and how I'm going to operate. I'm 26 now. And a couple of years ago, fresh out of undergrad, and then I did my postgrad, and then I did my master's degree. I thought I knew everything. I thought I had it all figured out. I learned that I didn't know shit. 5 lessons that I'm about to share here are not feel good lessons. They are incredibly uncomfortable. I will say that right off the bat. Let me start off with the most uncomfortable one, the progress illusion. And people also call it mental masturbation. What I mean by that is, you know, that feeling when you've spent like 3 years watching YouTube videos about entrepreneurship, you've read like basically all the famous books, articles on productivity, on how to start a business. You've listened to 6 podcasts about mindset, and you start to feel like you've accomplished something. It feels good in the moment. But if you actually look back, nothing actually happened. I spent my early 20s doing this constantly. I was consuming content about success while achieving nothing. I was planning my life instead of actually living it. I was researching on how to start so and so, but never actually doing it. And the worst part is, I genuinely believed that this was progress. I thought that learning was the same as doing. I thought that, knowing was the same as executing. The reality check that I needed and that I'm going to give to you is your brain cannot tell the difference between consuming content about something and actually doing it. And when you watch someone else's success, you start to feel like your brain gets the same dopamine hit as if like you'd achieved the same thing, like raised money for your business, or like you've, lost weight, or you've had the best relationship. All of it just like makes you feel like you achieved it, even though that's not the truth at all. This is why you can spend an entire weekend watching day in my life vlogs of successful people and feel extremely motivated. But then when Monday comes, you're exactly where you were before. I realized this when I looked at my browser history, and, I had like hundreds of bookmarks about how to do this, how to do that, how to create content, how to build an audience. But for the longest time, I didn't like actually commit to doing anything. I was like, oh, I'm going to test this out. I'm going to do that, which is good. And I'll talk more about that. But I think like the whole progress feels like the illusion of progress makes you feel like you're actually doing something when you're actually not doing anything. I was basically collecting information like it was going to transform into results by itself. The shift happened when I started tracking actual output instead of just input. So instead of asking myself, what did I learn today? I started asking, what did I create today? Instead of how many hours did I research, I started asking myself, how many things did I actually ship? I think we all know and can agree that you don't need to know everything before you start something new. You don't you don't have to consume every piece of content that exists that in your niche. You don't need to talk to every single person that exists in the industry. You just need to do one thing. One thing, learn from it, do it, and then go on to the next thing and learn it. Mental masturbation feels very productive because it's easier than actually being productive. It's so much easier to convince yourself you're making progress than actually doing the hard stuff that's actually going to create the progress. It's so much easier to watch someone's morning routine instead of actually waking up in the morning and doing that step-by-step routine, which I have very different thoughts on, but I'll talk more about that in another video. The cure is action bias over information bias. When you catch yourself consuming content, for the third or fourth hour straight, which we should not even be doing that, just stop right there. Do one small thing related to the stuff that you're supposedly learning about. Even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect, I do think like starting is something that we all are good at. We start things, but we don't actually commit to them. And the truth is, you'll learn more from failing at the said, thing you want to be an expert in, than watching 10 success stories about it. The most efficient success stories are of you trying and failing. That's the success story. Because have you looked at successful people? They always have like, I tried like 20 businesses before I launched this one. That's because they tried. We look at the success. We don't look at the try. They tried so many things before they became successful. What about you? What are we trying? The second lesson completely changed how I make decisions, which is developing an experimental mindset. I just talked about how I have tried a couple of things. Most of us make decisions like they're permanent. We agonize over choices because we think we have to get it right the first time. That, should I take this job? Should I move to the city? Should I start this project? But what I've learned is almost nothing is actually permanent. I mean, nothing is permanent, but most decisions are experiments, not life sentences, right? This hit me when I was thinking about, not wanting to do a certain corporate job, and I wanted to focus on things that I actually love doing. I spent months going back and forth. I spent, I made pros and cons lists. I talked to everyone in the industry that I knew of. I was paralyzed because I thought I was literally choosing my entire future, which was not the case, by the way. Then I reframed it. I was like, what if this is not a permanent decision? Rather, it's what if it's just an experiment that I'm running for, let's say, 6 months? I think I talked about it in another episode on, my podcast as well. Suddenly the pressure lifts, instead of am I making the right choice for the rest of my life, it becomes, what can I learn from trying this one project for a defined period? The experimental mindset works because it removes the weight of permanence. You're not committing to something forever, which means you're testing a hypothesis, which means you're collecting data and not making irreversible choices. Here's how it actually apply it now. Instead of, should I start this business? Ask yourself, what would I learn from trying this business for the next 6 months? Instead of, should I move to the city? What would it be like to live in a new city, in a new environment for about a year? This mindset has two major benefits. The first one is it makes decisions easier because it makes the stakes feel lower. The second one is it makes you more likely to actually try things instead of just staying in analysis paralysis. But the key here is you actually have to treat it like an experiment. That means setting a clear timeline, deciding what success looks like, deciding what data you're collecting, having an exit strategy. The beautiful thing about experiments is that they cannot fail. There's no failing, right? They can only give you data. Experiments or A/B testing only gives you data. There is no failing there. And if the experiment works, you can keep going with it or expand it, scale it. If it doesn't, then you learn something valuable out of it. You've got data, you move on. I've run so many experiments over the past 5 years. Some have worked, some haven't. And, I have zero regrets with each of them because all of them taught me something new about myself, about what I want in life and what works for me. The people that have the most regrets are the ones who never experimented. They're the ones who stayed safe. They're the ones who never tested their assumptions, who wondered what if instead of just finding out. Your 20s, I think, are the perfect time. I think even early 30s and even 30s, age is just a number, but I think they're the perfect time for experiments because the responsibilities that we have are relatively low and your recovery time is high. So use that advantage. Lesson number 3 is knowing when to let go. I think there's a sunk cost to clinging. This one is a painful lesson to learn, knowing when to let go. And I'm not just talking about relationships, although that's a part of it. I'm talking about everything we cling to that's no longer serving us. Projects, friendships, beliefs about yourself, plans that are not working, identities that don't fit anymore. I used to be the person who held on to everything. If I started something, I had to finish it. If I made a friend, that had to be a lifelong friend. If I had a goal, I had to achieve it no matter what happens. This sounds noble, but it's actually destructive. Clinging to things that aren't working is how we stay stuck. This wake-up call came when, I was trying to do this one thing for a couple of months and it clearly wasn't working, but I pushed myself to keep trying. I was like, the data is bad. I'm not enjoying it. It's not growing. I keep pushing because I feel like I've invested more in it. I just collected myself and I asked myself this question, which is how the name of my podcast came. If you were starting from zero today with everything you know now, would you start this project? And the answer was absolutely not. So that's when I understood the sunk cost fallacy in real life. I was continuing something bad because I didn't want to waste the time I'd already invested. Instead of cutting my losses and moving forward to something better, I was just stuck in analysis paralysis. So here's what I've actually learned about letting go. Letting go of projects. So just because you started something doesn't mean you have to finish it, right? your past self made the best decision based off of whatever information your past self had at that point. Great. But you have more information now. So why are we sticking to it? Letting go of relationships. Some friendships, some relationships have expiration dates. Some people are meant to be in your life for a season, not forever. Trying to force connections that don't naturally exist or naturally fade is exhausting for everyone involved. Letting go of old versions of yourself. The person you were 2 years ago is like they had different goals, different values, different circle, different priorities. You're allowed to outgrow your old self. And I think you're also allowed to want different things. I think I would also talk about letting go of other people's expectations. Your parents might have plans for you. Your friends have opinions about you. Society has a timeline for you. None of that matters if it's not aligned with who you want to be. The hardest part of letting go is that it feels like giving up. And, we're taught that quitting things is bad, that persistence is always good, that winners never quit. But the truth is, strategic quitting is a skill. Knowing what to let go, when to let go is just as important as knowing when to hold on, when to invest more. I think about it like this. Your energy, time, and attention are finite resources. Every moment you spend on something that's not working is a moment you cannot spend on something that might work. The opportunity cost of clinging is enormous. You will not get that time, that money, that anything back. Now, I have started to build this system. It's still in very early stages, but I'm starting to do a let go audit. Every few months, I'm going to start looking at things I'm doing. Hey, what am I holding on to that's no longer serving me? I've got to start thinking about that. And I will admit that it's not always easy to let go. Sometimes, most of the times, there's grief involved. Sometimes there's guilt. Sometimes there's fear about what's next. But on the other side of letting go is space, and space for new opportunities, space for new relationships, new versions of yourself that you haven't discovered yet. And you cannot grab new things while still holding on to the old stuff. Sometimes you just have to let go to make room for what's coming. It sounds very cliche, but it's true. The fourth lesson is progress is not linear. The roller coaster reality. Everyone talks about how progress is not linear, that it's like a wave, but nobody talks about what it's like to actually live through something like that. Let me tell you what it feels like. It feels like you're going insane. 1 week, everything is working. You're productive, you're motivated, opportunities are flowing, you feel like you've figured it out. The next week, nothing works. Even the things that used to work, it doesn't work. You cannot focus, everything feels hard, question every decision you've made. And because, I feel like we live in a culture that glorifies consistent growth, you think that something's wrong with you. You think you're broken, you think you've lost it. But what I wish, someone had told me, the valleys are part of the process, not evidence you're failing. I used to think that successful people had some secret for consistent progress, that they wake up motivated every day, that they had eliminated the down days, that they had figured everything out on how to maintain momentum indefinitely. That's not true. Everyone has valleys. The difference is how they respond to them. The first time I experienced a real valley where, for about a couple months, nothing worked. I felt stuck. I questioned everything. I thought it just means that I should quit. I thought it meant that I wasn't cut out for this, but nothing shifted. But there was a turning point, and not because I figured anything out by any means, but because I realized that valleys don't last forever. They talk about the dip and how the dip doesn't last forever. The momentum started coming back. Things that didn't work before slowly started to work again. And I realized that the valley hadn't been a detour. It was actually part of the entire path itself. Nonlinear paths actually look like this. You work on something for months with no visible results. Then suddenly one day you see that it compounds into one huge thing. You feel confident and clear for weeks. Then you hit a period of doubt and confusion. But I feel like both are normal. You have breakthrough moments followed by periods where you feel like you're moving backward. The breakthroughs would not exist without that plateau. You make 3 months of progress in 1 week, then spend the next months integrating that said progress into your system. The most dangerous thing you can do during a valley is assume that it's permanent. I did that. The second most dangerous thing is to try to force your way out of it. Valleys, they serve a purpose. They are where integration happens. You're learning lessons. You've got to integrate them. Your system has to process the growth that just occurred. these are the places where you develop resilience. You learn to trust the process even when you don't see the results. I learned to reframe valleys as a necessary part of growth rather than it being like an obstacle, that it was an evidence of failure. Now, whenever I hit a valley, I just ask myself, like, what is this teaching me? What do I need to rest or recover from? Where can I try integrating these lessons from? And sometimes it's hard. You just have to just accept that it's hard. And, I also think about how can I support myself through this instead of trying to fight it. The peaks feel amazing, but the valleys are where real growth happens. And I feel like everyone hits that point in life. The valleys are where you discover what you're actually made of. And the thing about nonlinear progress that nobody tells you is the valleys get easier to navigate, but they don't go away. Even 5 years in, I still have weeks where nothing seems to work. And the difference is that I don't panic anymore. I'm trying not to panic anymore because I know it's temporary. The goal is never to eliminate the valleys. The goal is to trust the peaks are coming, even when you just don't see them anymore. The last lesson is about fear. It's probably the most important one. For most of my life, I thought that being brave meant not having any fear. I thought that successful people somehow eliminated fear from their lives, that, fear was the enemy. I really thought that fear was the enemy. I was completely wrong, because fear is not the enemy. Resistance to fear is the enemy. What I mean by that is when you resist fear, when you fight it, when you try to avoid that it's there, or when you try to push it away, you're actually giving it more power because you're making it the boss of your decisions. Think about it this way. If you're avoiding doing something because you're afraid of failure, fear is controlling your choices. The fear of failure is controlling your choices. If you're trying to eliminate fear before you act, fear is setting your timeline. If you're waiting to feel brave, fear is ruining your life. The breakthrough came when I realized that fear isn't something to overcome. It's just something to include. Instead of I need to stop being afraid before I can do this, I just started telling myself, you know what, I am scared, but I'm just going to do it anyways. Instead of fear means I should stop, it became fear means I'm growing. That shift changed everything for me. When I started my first podcast, I was terrified. I spent weeks trying to talk myself out of the fear. I researched equipment obsessively. I planned episode I never recorded. I waited for years for the fear to go away. It never went away. I recorded the first episode while I was really scared, and the second one and the third one. Eventually, I realized that the fear was not actually going anywhere. I have like so many different drafts of me filming audio notes, trying to make podcasts. I have so many different secret projects that I actually still is available publicly that I never promoted because I was so scared of what people might think. Eventually, I realized that the fear was not going anywhere, that it was actually just stopping me. Fear is information. It's not instruction. It tells you that something matters to you, not that you should avoid it. Fear is often proportional to importance. The thing that scares you the most are usually the things that will change your life for the better. Fear is very future focused. It's your brain trying to tell you or protect you from imaginary scenarios. The people who seem fearless aren't actually fearless. They've just learned to act in spite of fear rather than waiting for it to disappear. When you're afraid of criticism, people criticize you more because they think it has power over you. When you're afraid of failure, people are less likely to trust you because they can sense that insecurity. So when you acknowledge your fear without being controlled by them, when you can say, yeah, this kind of scares me, but I'm doing it anyway, people respect that. So the goal is not fearlessness. The goal is courage. So there you have it. 5 lessons from 5 years. Building from zero. These are not pretty lessons. They're not Instagram quotes. They can just like motivational quotes you can put on Instagram. They're the ones that actually change how you operate in the world. And I just want to say, if you're in your early 20s listening to this, don't try to just learn these intellectually. You have to live through them. You have to make mistakes. You have to face confusions and experience valleys. If you're older and nodding along and, you've learned some of these lessons the hard way too, I just hope, some of us are still probably learning it. The thing about real lessons is that they are not one-time downloads. They keep happening. They're ongoing practices. And I'm still learning a lot of them. I still screw up, obviously. I still have to remind myself of what I supposedly already know. That's what building from zero actually looks like. And it's messy, it's non-linear, it's uncomfortable, but it's real. And yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.